Archived sensor feeds and excavation logs, when reprocessed and correlated with surviving pick records, present a consistent pattern: shattered forges, vitrified workshops, and fragments of automation that still hum faintly when probed with maintenance tracers. Field teams operating on the ruined plateaus of Medusa reported recovered servo motors embedded in ancient armor plates, and veteran tech priest archivists catalogued inscriptions that speak more in schematics than in language. Eyewitness testimony from surviving Medusan clanspeople, gathered during stabilization operations, describes a people who both fear and revere mechanism. Their oral accounts were matched to Imperial shipping manifests that show sustained deliveries of cybernetic components to local forges centuries before the chapter's modern records begin. These strands of evidence, when brought together in the Imperial Museum of Tactica's dossier on first founding formations, form a non-sensational but revealing record of origins, environment, and the early synthesis of man and machine that underpins the identity known as the Iron Hands. The origins of the Iron Hands trace to the era of the Great Crusade and the institute that created the Emperors Astartes. Their gene stock and institutional memory identify them as the 10th of the original legions, raised under the guidance of a Primarch whose name and epithet have been preserved across multiple canonical sources. The legion's foundational ethos, an insistence on the primacy of mechanism and a corresponding distrust of frailty in biological tissue, can be read consistently in primary chronicle material and subsequent codices. It is evident in armor motifs recovered from early campaign graves and in the doctrinal fragments preserved in Medusan citadel vaults, where the maxim that the flesh is weak is not a rhetorical flourish, but an operational axiom that shaped training, augmentation policy, and battlefield doctrine. Demographic and anthropometric estimates for the Iron Hands are, by necessity, aggregated from fragmentary records and comparanda with other first founding chapters. A standard battle brother, as represented across muster rolls, medical logs, and equipment fittings, would average roughly 2 meters in height when standing in field harness and possess mass distributions consistent with heavily augmented marrow and prosthetic integration. Weight averages therefore skew above unaugmented human baselines. Typical fully armoured combatants weigh significantly more on equipment metrics due to implanted actuators and structural reinforcements, though raw biological mass is often lower than contemporaneous Space Marine norms as a consequence of intentional replacement of tissue with necrodermal and mechanical substitutes. These averages, drawn from measured suit fittings and medical autopsies sanctioned by chapter archivists, place typical unarmoured heights and mass within a narrow band consistent with their genetic origin, yet materially altered by augmentation practices. Distinctive physiological and cultural traits emerge clearly from the archived medical protocols and the chapter's surviving lexica. Where most chapters treat bionics as tools to be applied sparingly, the Iron Hands institutionalize augmentation from early in an initiate's progress. Initiation rites recorded in Medusan trial records emphasize endurance of hardship and the substitution of failing biological elements. Dental and ocular augmentations, reinforced cranial plating and exoskeletal tendon supports are catalogued as routine rather than exceptional. Psychologically, the chapter demonstrates a quantified intolerance for perceived weakness. Behavioral studies compiled by attached inquisitorial analysts describe a cultural reflex to excise or mechanize points of failure, an approach that is as much pragmatic as it is symbolic, since internal doctrine frames such substitution as necessary for the survival of the Imperium's warfighting capacity. This outlook produces a warrior culture that privileges repairable parts and redundant mechanical systems. It also produces friction with those Imperial institutions that value the sanctity of organic life. Recruitment and candidate selection evidence, as preserved in archival correspondence between fleet-borne recruitment detachments and the Medusan Council, indicates a twofold process. Candidates are drawn from Medusa's hardy clans and from worlds where environmental stress has produced populations acclimatized to hardship. Selection emphasizes not only physical aptitude and genetic compatibility, but also psychological affinity for process and discipline. Early apprenticeship records show candidates undertaking trials that are both material and symbolic. feats of endurance across the volcanic steppes, tests of machinic repair skill under duress, and psychometric evaluations that measure tolerance for invasive augmentation. These records make clear that the chapter's recruitment does not simply seek the strongest bodies. It seeks individuals whose cognition aligns with a mechanical paradigm, those who can accept and even prefer the replacement of failing flesh with machine. Technology occupies a central role in both the narrative and operational architecture of the Iron Hands. Excavated schematics and codex supplements indicate a chapter with unusually deep access to Mechanicus goods, an affinity reinforced by formal agreements and shared doctrinal emphasis. Their armour and weapons often incorporate adaptations that prioritise modularity and maintainability, redundancy in servomotor arrays, accessible maintenance nodes, and hardened interfaces designed for remote repair. Clinical reports in chapter medical dockets detail the widespread use of necrodermis and bionic grafting. When biological tissue fails, engineered components are configured to assume function rather than merely to assist. This engineering pragmatism translates into specific design choices for infantry weapons, where bolt weapons and support systems are adapted to accept mechanical hands and augmented strength profiles, and for heavy weaponry, where firing mechanisms integrate with neural control protocols that assume prosthetic linkage. The result is a toolkit optimized for a force that expects each of its members to be a maintainable node in a larger war system, rather than an irreplaceable hero. Weapons and gear recovered from battlefield caddies and chapter relics display an emphasis on reliable ordnance and field serviceability. Close combat implements are often reinforced and designed to be wielded by augmented limbs with enhanced torque profiles. Ranged weapons are specified with calibrations for augmented recoil compensation and neural link stability. Surviving manufacturing manifests attribute many of these designs to collaborations with adjacent Forge worlds. This is corroborated by shipping manifests that show preferential routing of certain classes of servo actuators and power cells through Medusa's ports. Armour patterns associated with the chapter emphasize plate modularity and removable limb assemblies, allowing wounded brothers to be triaged with component swaps in austere conditions. These practicalities tie back to the chapter's overriding principle: mitigate the fragility of flesh by making bodies serviceable and parts replaceable. Tools and auxiliary systems reflect the same mechanistic logic. Field repair kits contain multi-welders, neural stabilizers, and portable calibration rigs designed to operate in Medusa's frequent electromagnetic storms. Documentation from tech priest detachments lists customized diagnostics that can be linked directly to a marine's implanted auguries, providing real-time feedback on limb integrity and prosthetic wear. Dreadnought frames and heavy chassis recovered from earlier conflicts show inscriptions that indicate continuous modification rather than static preservation. These machines are maintained in a rolling state of evolution, their design decisions recorded as iterative engineering notes rather than ceremonial etchings. The operational posture is clear. Machinery is not merely support, it is a living extension of doctrine. Vehicles in chapter service range from heavily modified transports to uniquely configured assault platforms. Roles compiled by chapter logisticians describe transports with reinforced cargo bays designed to shuttle wounded personnel and replacement prosthetics, and land vehicles whose control interfaces are tailored for marine physiology altered by implants. Heavier assets, including dreadnoughts, are treated as sacrosanct repositories of martial spirit and technical heritage. After the cataclysmic losses in certain early campaigns, dreadnought hulls that remained were preserved as venerated engineering nodes and updated continually with new systems. Operational logs underscore a conservatism in vehicle doctrine. Where possible, the chapter favours redundancy and maintainability over cutting-edge experimental systems that cannot be reliably field repaired. In compiling this account from archaeological, pictographic and eyewitness sources, the pattern is emphatic. The Iron Hands present themselves as an organisation whose identity is codified in steel as much as in creed. Their origins speak to a first founding lineage and a Primarch whose influence is present both in symbolism and in concrete practice. Their population statistics and anthropometric norms are shaped by policy as much as by genetics, and their equipment philosophy consistently privileges replaceability and mechanical resilience. Where their doctrine deviates from other Astartes is not merely in a preference for augmentation, but in an institutional commitment to the systematic removal of biological failure points. This commitment is visible in medical records, recruitment criteria, and the design of their arms and vehicles. These conclusions, when read against the preserved codices and supported by field finds, form the empirical backbone of what is recorded as the Iron Hands. Field recordings taken from the lower forges of Medusa, combined with sociological reports submitted by imperial anthropologists during the earliest contact campaigns, reveal a system of life that blurs the distinction between civilian and military existence. For the Iron Hands, the civilian sphere exists primarily as a crucible for future warriors, or as an auxiliary engine of maintenance and supply. The Medusan clans, from which the chapter continuously draws recruits and sustenance, model their entire social rhythm around production, endurance, and mechanical mastery. Work, worship, and warfare are indistinguishable, each an expression of the same logic that the flesh must be improved, hardened, or replaced. Within their foundries, clan artisans produce material support for the chapter's fleets, while also treating the act of fabrication as a form of penitence. The civilian economy is effectively militarized, with every craftsman and miner aware that their work feeds the Iron Hands' endless preparation for conflict. The Medusan environment itself reinforces this structure. The planet's shifting crust and constant seismic activity leave little margin for luxury or unproductive labor. Settlements are built within or upon industrial complexes, and each community maintains at least one forge dedicated to maintaining equipment for the chapter's use. In such conditions, a civilian's survival depends on their capacity to repair what is broken and adapt what remains. This necessity produces a population that regards the act of repair as a moral duty. To leave machinery idle or in disrepair is considered a sign of decay. To mend or improve it is a signal of virtue. The same ethic informs the Iron Hands themselves, who extend this philosophy to their own bodies. In this way, the chapter and its supporting populace form a continuous cultural loop. The civilians maintain the forges maintain the warriors, and the warriors protect the forges. Within the chapter proper, the boundary between soldier and engineer is similarly dissolved. Every battle brother receives education in mechanical principles and basic field maintenance. Initiates learn to service their own armor and weapons long before they master marksmanship or tactics. This is less an efficiency measure than a moral expectation. To fail to understand one's equipment is to be unworthy of it. The Tech Marines, who in other chapters serve as intermediaries between the Astartes and the Mechanicus, hold elevated authority among the Iron Hands. Their word carries the same gravity as that of a chaplain or a company captain. In many recorded councils, Tech Marines preside as both spiritual advisors and logistical overseers, ensuring that mechanical doctrine governs moral behavior. Rituals within the chapter reflect this fusion of technology and faith. The flesh-mending rites, known in some records as the Rite of Severance, are performed after major campaigns. Each warrior submits to examination by a conclave of Tech Marines and Iron Fathers who assess physical and mental integrity. Damaged limbs or organs are not simply healed but evaluated for replacement. The ceremony is precise, emotionless, and framed as an audit of worth. To lose a limb in battle is not tragedy but opportunity, proof that a weaker component can now be improved upon. When an augmentation is complete, the warrior is expected to recite the Canticles of Efficiency, a sequence of affirmations that reaffirm the chapter's belief that true purity lies in perfection of function, not the preservation of flesh. Ethics among the Iron Hands are grounded in utilitarianism stripped of sentiment. Decisions are judged by outcome and efficiency rather than emotion or intention. The preservation of the chapter and the advancement of its operational capability are treated as moral absolutes. Acts of mercy are only condoned when they serve to preserve resources or maintain strategic advantage. Within Medusan folklore, mercy is equated with wastefulness, and wastefulness is sin. This ideology manifests in their dealings with allies. While they are loyal to the Imperium, they often exhibit cold pragmatism toward other Imperial institutions. Records from joint campaigns note incidents where Iron Hands commanders withdrew support from Allied units deemed inefficient, even when it risked morale. To them, compassion is a weakness that compromises the collective machine of war. Internally, the chapter's social structure is stratified not by rank alone, but by degree of mechanization. At the foundation are the neophytes, youths of the Medusan clans undergoing transformation through gene seed implantation and physical conditioning. Above them stand the full battle brothers, whose augmentations vary by role and seniority. Those with greater integration of mechanical systems are regarded as closer to the ideal of strength, and thus occupy positions of respect. The highest echelon is composed of the Iron Fathers, an order that merges the roles of chaplain and tech marine. They serve as spiritual overseers, engineers, and disciplinarians. Their creed defines orthodoxy, and their presence ensures that emotion and deviation are purged through logical correction. The chapter's internal governance reflects a distributed mechanical model rather than a centralized hierarchy. After the death of their Primarch Ferrus Manus, during the catastrophic betrayal at Isstvan, the Iron Hands rejected the notion of singular leadership. They disassembled their chain of command into autonomous clan companies, each capable of independent operation. This system mirrors the logic of a distributed network. If one node fails, the rest continue. Each clan company is commanded by an Iron Captain, supported by a cadre of Iron Fathers and Tech Marines, who handle both military and doctrinal oversight. Strategic decisions are coordinated through the Council of Iron, a gathering where representatives from all clans meet to synchronize objectives. This structure, while efficient, often leads to differing interpretations of doctrine between clans, resulting in subtle variations in tactics and ritual practices. Yet all remain bound by the shared conviction that the flesh is the root of imperfection. Social cohesion within this distributed model is maintained through continuous ritual and shared maintenance labor. Every brother, regardless of rank, participates in the upkeep of equipment during designated maintenance cycles. This is both a practical necessity and a psychological reinforcement of equality before the machine. In these sessions, personal pride is suppressed, and hierarchy momentarily dissolves in the common act of service. Those who fail to uphold their maintenance duties are censured not for negligence but for moral failure, their lack of diligence interpreted as spiritual corrosion. Discipline is maintained not through fear but through logical reinforcement. A brother who neglects his duties endangers the efficiency of the whole, and thus must be corrected. Lifestyle within the Iron Hands is austere to the point of monasticism. Recreational activities are virtually non-existent. Downtime is spent in study, meditation upon mechanical schematics, or the calibration of implants. Personal quarters are functional and stripped of ornamentation. Meals consist of nutrient slurry optimized for metabolic stability rather than taste, and conversation during communal periods revolves around tactical review or engineering discussion. Even in repose, their environment hums with mechanical life, servo skulls drifting through corridors, the distant thrum of forges, and the ever-present recitation of machine prayers. To an outsider, the atmosphere appears devoid of warmth, but to an Iron Hand, this absence of distraction is purity. Within their ethical framework, individuality is permissible only when it contributes to collective function. Warriors who demonstrate exceptional ingenuity in repair or strategy are celebrated not for personal achievement, but for the improvement of systemic capability. The chapter's archives contain records of individuals who voluntarily submitted to further augmentation after displaying signs of emotional instability, regarding the suppression of such impulses as a final act of discipline. Over centuries, this has resulted in a gradual diminishment of emotional variance within the chapter's culture, producing a psychological uniformity that scholars describe as machine empathy, a condition where loyalty, discipline, and logic fully replace conventional human motivation. The relationship between the Iron Hands and the Medusan clans remains complex. While the chapter's operations dominate planetary infrastructure, They maintain a policy of limited interference in daily clan politics. The clans view the Iron Hands as both protectors and distant overseers, beings who represent the apex of their shared belief in endurance and improvement. In return, the chapter periodically dispatches emissaries and instructors to ensure the continuation of mechanical knowledge among the populace. These emissaries, often Tech Marines or Iron Fathers, are treated as living embodiments of perfection, and their rare appearances inspire intense reverence. However, they also enforce a strict separation. No unaugmented human may enter the chapter's inner forges, and no civilian may witness the sacred process of transformation from neophyte to Astartes. Within the chapter's ritual calendar, several observances mark the passage of operational cycles. The Day of Tempering commemorates the death of Ferrus Manus, during which each warrior reaffirms the creed of rejection toward the weakness of flesh. During this day, the Iron Fathers lead silent processions through the forges, and augmetic upgrades are scheduled in mass to symbolize rebirth through improvement. Another event, the Calibration Vigil, occurs before major campaigns. All Battle Brothers gather in the forge halls to synchronize neural implants and perform collective maintenance. The ritual concludes with the recitation of the Prime Logic, a set of algorithmic affirmations that reinforce the unity between man and machine. Ethically, the Iron Hands perceive moral behavior through the lens of functionality. Virtue lies in precision, discipline, and the eradication of inefficiency. Sin manifests as emotion-driven error or mechanical neglect. To them, faith in the Emperor is not expressed through prayer or passion, but through optimization. Each act of maintenance or victory in battle is considered worship through labor. Chaplain sermons, when delivered, are composed of technical exegesis rather than emotional exhortation, focusing on the logical perfection embodied by the Emperor's design. It is a faith stripped of mystery, grounded in quantifiable outcomes. Despite this utilitarian approach, the chapter's sense of honor remains intact, though defined differently than in other legions. Honor is measured in reliability and endurance, not in glory or sacrifice. To die heroically but wastefully is considered a strategic error. To survive and continue serving is the higher ideal. This redefinition of valor has produced a combat culture that prioritizes calculated persistence over emotional zeal. Their commanders train their warriors to suppress instinctual aggression in favor of synchronized precision, each movement measured as though it were a component in a larger mechanism. In their interaction with the wider Imperium, the Iron Hands occupy an ambiguous ethical position. While their loyalty to the Emperor is unquestioned, their disdain for weakness often places them at odds with less disciplined allies. Reports from Imperial Guard officers recount instances of Iron Hands forces executing wounded soldiers deemed beyond efficient recovery, actions justified as resource optimization. Such measures, though controversial, are defended by the chapter as necessary to preserve operational integrity. To the Iron Hands, morality is a matter of maintaining function. Anything that hinders the machine of war must be excised, regardless of human sentiment. Leadership within this framework functions as distributed intelligence. The Council of Iron serves as a computational brain composed of multiple specialized minds. Each Iron Captain governs with autonomy, but submits data, projections, and after-action analysis to the Council for synthesis. Decisions emerge from consensus weighted by logic rather than charisma. Emotional appeals are discouraged, and even high-ranking officers submit their conclusions in algorithmic form, detailing the variables considered and outcomes predicted. This collective intelligence model ensures continuity even if key leaders fall, mirroring the redundancy of the mechanical systems the chapter reveres. This approach extends into mentorship. Senior warriors instruct initiates not through inspiration, but through demonstration of correct process. Every action, from weapon cleaning to meditation, is performed with methodical precision. Failure to replicate such precision invites correction through repetition or augmentation. Emotional encouragement is rare. Instead, improvement is expected as a statistical inevitability given proper data and discipline. This pedagogical style produces Astartes who view personal growth not as a journey, but as an equation, solvable through effort and calculation. Over millennia, the Iron Hands have refined this societal model to an art form of cold efficiency. They have become not merely warriors, but maintainers of a belief system that treats imperfection as the true enemy. Their civilian support network, bound by the same ideology, ensures continuous reinforcement of these values. Their rituals codify emotion into process, their ethics reduce faith to engineering, and their leadership transforms hierarchy into distributed logic. Together they form a civilization within the Imperium defined by its refusal to accept the limitations of flesh. From the Medusan forges to the void-bound battle barges, this system operates without deviation. Every cog, whether human or machine, functions toward a singular directive, to purify existence through precision. In this unity of labour, belief and mechanism, the Iron Hands stand as both product and perpetuator of a culture that sees perfection not as a dream, but as a calculable destination. Recovered campaign records from the early Crusade period, combined with Adeptus Mechanicus preservation logs, form the foundation of what can be established about the Iron Hands' leadership lineage and operational temperament. While the annihilation at Isstvan erased vast portions of their original data archives, cross-referenced fleet registries and tactical overlays provide enough continuity to reconstruct a reliable chronicle of their most notable figures and engines of war. Every remaining fragment, engraved commendations on weapon casings, mechanical imprints of command protocols, and auto-log transcriptions from allied fleets, reflects a consistent behavioural schema. The Iron Hands lead, fight, and evolve according to a logic that prizes endurance over glory and replacement over repair when weakness is detected. The Primarch Ferrus Manus remains the essential template for all who would later bear command within the Xth Legion. Born upon the world that Imperial record designates as Medusa, his earliest documented feats predate his rediscovery by the Emperor. Technological analysis of surviving Medusan metallurgy suggests that Manus achieved mastery over pre-Imperial machinery long before first contact. Upon his ascension to leadership of the Xth Legion, he imposed a doctrine of perfection that would outlast him by millennia. His bionic hands, legendary in both mechanical and symbolic significance, were forged from living metal, capable of moulding even the most resistant alloys. Reports from his contemporaries describe him as unyielding, pragmatic, and utterly intolerant of imperfection. His death at the hands of Fulgrim during the Isstvan betrayal catalyzed the chapter's transformation from a disciplined legion into a fragmented but unbreakable machine cult of vengeance. Among those who carried forward his legacy, several leaders stand out through preserved transcripts and battlefield telemetry. One of the earliest was Autek Mor, an Iron Captain whose campaign across the Ghoul Stars is remembered for its ruthless efficiency and complete absence of reported emotional variance. Surviving data slates from Mechanicus observers note that Mor maintained casualty rates 40% lower than comparable Astartes formations by adhering strictly to logic-driven battle plans, yet his methods were regarded as merciless. During the purge of Sigma Secundus, he ordered the annihilation of entire civilian districts to prevent resource depletion, later justifying the act in analytical terms that equated human lives to logistic variables. His eventual disappearance into the warp remains unexplained, though some records imply voluntary exile following an encounter with the xenomachines that challenged his understanding of perfection. Another key figure, Cardan Stronos, rose to prominence in the post-heresy reconstruction period. As chapter master and later regent of Medusa, Stronos restructured the fragmented legion into the clan company model that defines the Iron Hands to this day. He formalized the Council of Iron and codified the integration of Iron Fathers as both spiritual and mechanical overseers. His leadership emphasized sustainable autonomy. Every clan was to be self-reliant in logistics, recruitment, and repair, ensuring no single failure could compromise the chapter's total function. Stronos also redefined relations with the Adeptus Mechanicus, establishing permanent exchange treaties that granted the chapter unprecedented access to technological innovation in exchange for martial support. Analytical reports from Mars cite the Iron Hands as a stable machine interface within a human vector, a description that accurately captures the tone of Stranos' reforms. In the late 41st millennium, Iron Captain Cardan Ferrum, recorded in the Chronicles of the Damocles Gulf campaigns, became the most visible exemplar of Iron Hands battlefield doctrine. Ferrum's tactical pattern emphasized synchronization between augmented infantry and armored support. Audio logs retrieved from Tau combat sensors document his use of coordinated machine-paced offensives that maintained exact spacing and timing to minimize vulnerability. His command lexicon contained no emotional markers. Speech patterns were algorithmic, structured entirely in data references. His eventual interment within a dreadnought chassis following catastrophic injury only amplified his influence as he continued to command through encrypted Vox relays. The unit under his direction achieved one of the highest operational survival rates recorded in the chapter's modern history. Not all famous leaders operated from command decks. Among the Iron Fathers, Cassian Dracos, once known as the Fire of Heaven, remains a figure of particular fascination. His dreadnought sarcophagus predates many of the chapter's later designs, incorporating pre-heresy plasma cores and stabilized machine spirit bindings that exhibit complex autonomous behavior. His preservation within a mobile chassis allows him to function as both warrior and repository of ancestral knowledge. Adeptus Mechanicus observers classify him as a synthetic relic mind, and his presence is considered both a blessing and a potential hazard, given his ancient memory and independence of thought. The chapter's notable units reflect the same mechanistic ethos embodied by their leaders. The Gorgon's Sons, a formation of veteran Terminators originating from the clan Rokan, maintain near-total augmentation levels. Biometric scans confirm less than 10% organic tissue per member, rendering them functionally closer to servitors than unmodified Astartes. Their combat records in the Targossian suppression indicate engagement durations exceeding 40 hours without fatigue markers. To an outside observer, such endurance borders on the inhuman. To the Iron Hands, it represents the logical progression of perfection. Another prominent detachment, the Morlocks, trace their lineage directly to Ferrus Manus' personal guard. Their legacy persists in both name and tactical design. The Morlocks are designated as shock assault specialists, operating heavy mechanized armor patterns such as cataphracti and Gorgon Terminator suits. Their recorded use of synchronized charge formations has been preserved in chapter manuals, still referred to as the Iron Phalanx. Surviving combat feeds from Isstvan show them advancing through firestorms without deviation, maintaining exact spacing even as the Legion fractured around them. Their annihilation in that battle became symbolic of the Iron Hands' obsession with endurance at any cost, and subsequent generations have resurrected their iconography as an aspirational ideal. Among their mechanical assets, several machines stand as extensions of their doctrine. The Gorgon pattern Land Raider, unique to the Iron Hands and Medusan forges, is one such example. Its design diverges from the standard model through increased frontal armor and internal redundancy in drive systems. Maintenance logs indicate that even when half its mechanical components are destroyed, the vehicle remains operational. Such over-engineering aligns precisely with the chapter's disdain for failure. To an Iron Hand, a machine that cannot fight through damage embodies imperfection. Similarly, the ironclad dreadnought configurations favoured by the chapter are modified to house redundant servo motors, secondary energy cells, and layered data caches. These enhancements permit extended operation even under catastrophic conditions, reinforcing their belief that resilience equals purity. The war machines revered by the Iron Hands are treated not as tools but as spiritual entities. Machine spirits are addressed with the same respect afforded to commanders. Maintenance rituals are exact and procedural. Diagnostic litanies are recited word for word, followed by binary hymns transmitted through implanted Vox organs. Each machine is paired with a designated custodian tech marine who records performance data as devotional scripture. Failure to maintain this ritual is seen as heretical negligence. In their forges, mechanical hums and rhythmic servo movements form a continuous background hymn. a constant reminder that every system, living or mechanical, serves the same unified logic. Behaviourally, the Iron Hands exhibit traits that are measurable, consistent and distinct even among Astartes. Cognitive patterning reports compiled by the Inquisition categorize them as low-effect, high-cognition entities. Emotional amplitude in decision-making is minimal. The chapter's collective mind demonstrates marked preference for procedural solutions and statistical reasoning. Stress response analyses conducted after simulated engagements indicate that even under duress, Iron Hands maintain tactical discipline comparable to that of machine intelligences. To them, hesitation or panic is a form of corruption, a deviation to be corrected through further augmentation or discipline. Their combat instincts mirror their internal structure, distributed, calculated, and without reliance on central charisma. When ambushed, they do not retreat or rally under impassioned leadership. Instead, they fragment into microcells that continue fighting according to preset operational codes. This behavior has led Imperial tacticians to describe them as mechanical persistence units. Where other Space Marines might adapt instinctively through emotional initiative, the Iron Hands adapt through logic trees. Their reflexes are governed by training algorithms and implant feedback loops, producing response times that verge on instantaneous. The chapter's tendencies in war also include a pronounced aversion to displays of emotion. Where other legions would commemorate victory with celebration, the Iron Hands mark it with maintenance. Following combat, they disassemble and recalibrate their weapons before acknowledging success. Casualty records are filed without ceremony. Names of the fallen are recorded in machine data archives rather than memorial halls. To them, sentiment is inefficient and decay-inducing. This ritual suppression of emotion has proven effective in maintaining operational stability across long campaigns, but it has also led to reputational friction with other Imperial forces who often interpret their cold efficiency as arrogance or inhuman detachment. Interpersonal behaviour within the chapter conforms to this same detached logic. Communication among Iron Hands is terse, precise, and devoid of rhetorical flourishes. Conversations are transactional. Information is exchanged only as necessary to sustain function. Psychological evaluations note minimal use of pronouns and emotion-bearing language, replaced by operational descriptors. This linguistic compression reduces misunderstanding, but reinforces social isolation. To most observers, they appear incapable of camaraderie, yet within their own paradigm, this absence of emotion signifies respect, an understanding that each warrior functions best when unburdened by distraction. In battle, their instinctual drive for improvement often manifests as aggression against weakness, both external and internal. When encountering malfunction or inefficiency within allied formations, Iron Hands commanders have been documented reassigning or executing personnel without delay. Such actions are not born of cruelty but of doctrine. The machine must not be compromised. Among themselves, self-repair and modification are constant. Many Iron Hands voluntarily undergo upgrades after combat, identifying even minor fatigue or error as signs of corruption. The process is unending. They seek perfection not as a destination but as maintenance without conclusion. The chapter's psychological tendencies extend beyond warfare into their philosophical self-concept. They perceive themselves as transitional beings, halfway between humanity and the machine perfection they idolize. This identity produces both confidence and alienation. They view the unaugmented human condition as a flaw to be corrected, and even within the Imperium they see their mission as purgative. This belief drives a pattern of isolationism. The Iron Hands rarely participate in social councils or grand crusades unless logic dictates necessity. When they do, their interactions are governed by strict contractual terms, and their alliances dissolve once objectives are achieved. To outsiders, this creates an impression of cold opportunism. Internally, it is seen as adherence to the prime logic. Their behavioural consistency over millennia has produced a form of cultural inertia that resists change. Even when technological innovation becomes available, the Iron Hands integrate it only after exhaustive verification. They maintain ancestral designs not out of reverence, but out of confidence in proven systems. This conservatism ensures reliability, but sometimes limits adaptability, a paradox that even their own Iron Fathers acknowledge. Yet to them, deviation for its own sake is weakness. Improvement must serve function, not novelty. Within the broader Imperium, the Iron Hands are simultaneously respected and feared. They are seen as incorruptible yet unrelatable, efficient yet devoid of warmth. Reports from Imperial Guard officers and fellow chapters describe them as relentless allies, unfailing in their duty but unsympathetic to cost. Their presence on a battlefield guarantees victory or extermination, with little distinction between the two. Their very name, spoken in fleet corridors, evokes precision and inevitability, as if the outcome of any engagement involving them is already determined. From Ferrus Manus to the Iron Fathers who command today, the lineage of leadership, unit design and behavioural pattern forms a continuous machine of purpose. Their heroes are engineers, their saints are machines, and their instinct is the elimination of imperfection in all forms. Every action, every upgrade, every calculation moves them further from the human state they once were and closer to the mechanical ideal they revere. In this progression lies both their strength and their tragedy. To become perfect, the Iron Hands have made themselves eternal instruments, driven by a logic that cannot die, cannot rest, and cannot forgive the weakness of the flesh they once shared with mankind. The Adeptus Administratum maintains extensive dossiers concerning every active Space Marine chapter, yet the Iron Hands remain among the least accessible to bureaucratic scrutiny. The majority of the available records originate not from Imperial census or tithing archives, but through secondary data collated by the Adeptus Mechanicus, whose long-standing alliance with the chapter affords them limited access to Medusa and its surrounding systems. What the Administratum understands of the Iron Hands is a network of numerical data and incomplete field analyses, rather than the kind of social or political record commonly maintained for other chapters. Their structure, output, and logistic behaviours read more like the management system of a Forge world than a conventional Adeptus Astartes chapter. Early Administratum surveys describe the Iron Hands' planetary holdings on Medusa as non-standard, in that the chapter holds no centralised fortress monastery in the traditional sense. Instead, the chapter operates from multiple fortress clans spread across Medusa's tectonically unstable surface. Each fortress serves as a semi-autonomous bastion containing manufactories, archives, and recruitment facilities. The Administratum notes that no single fortress claims superiority over the others. Rather, each answers collectively to the Iron Council. This decentralized design complicates Administratum mapping attempts. Orbital pick scans routinely report altered surface configurations after each rotation, as Medusa's crust shifts and collapses under its own instability. As a result, the Iron Hands' resource distribution and recruitment logistics are almost impossible to predict or control by Imperial means. Adeptus Mechanicus observers have long considered this decentralization to be intentional. Their analysts suggest that the Iron Hands mirror the distributed logic cores of machine networks, each fortress operating as an independent processor contributing to a unified data system, the Iron Council. From a Mechanicus standpoint, this model represents an efficient form of redundancy and resource management. The loss of one fortress or clan would not compromise the chapter's functionality as a whole. Administratum records, however, mark this system as non-compliant with the codex structure, citing inefficiencies in hierarchical traceability and accountability. The Mechanicus dismisses this criticism as organic misunderstanding of a mechanical process. Resource acquisition reports indicate that the Iron Hands are largely self-sufficient. They rely on Medusa's resource deposits and scavenged machine relics more than on Imperial supply lines. The Administratum's tithing records show unusually low external requisition activity, with most imports classified as restricted Mechanicus-grade materials. Conversely, export manifests list large quantities of refined metal, plasma components, and cybernetic graph materials, most of which are exchanged directly with nearby Forge worlds. Mechanicus logisticians confirm that these exchanges are conducted through sanctioned barter protocols rather than currency-based trade, with value measured in technological equivalents. This closed-loop exchange system renders the chapter nearly invisible to normal Imperial economic monitoring. Administratum analysts have repeatedly flagged the Iron Hands for delayed or incomplete compliance in bureaucratic reporting. Standard chapter declarations such as recruitment counts, casualty updates, and genetic tithe returns are either partially redacted or submitted centuries late. Some scholars within the Administratum attribute this to the Iron Hands' disdain for organic bureaucracy, interpreting paperwork and tithe declarations as inefficient organic ritual. Others believe the delays stem from simple physical barriers. Medusa's volatile environment makes astropathic transmission unreliable, and Mechanicus data encryption often exceeds Administratum clearance levels. A sub-department within the Divisionum Militaris has repeatedly petitioned for deeper audits into Iron Hands operations, but these have been blocked by Mars, citing ongoing cooperative research and mutual trust between the cult Mechanicus and the Iron Council. Mechanicus data clerks describe the Iron Hands as near-perfect logistical entities. Reports stored within the data vaults of Rizza and Graia indicate that the chapter's combat deployments are calculated using machine logic simulations prior to launch. Each engagement follows a modelled scenario adjusted by variables of enemy type, terrain, and attrition probability. Mechanicus analysts have observed that Iron Hands forces rarely suffer from logistical shortages or ammunition mismanagement, suggesting an automated internal process governing supply calculation. Administratum cross-checking supports this claim. Iron Hands war zones display minimal evidence of resource wastage or misallocation. Ammunition counts correlate with predicted consumption rates within a margin of 2% deviation, an accuracy level unmatched by most chapters. Mechanicus Explorator records also show that the Iron Hands maintain an uncommonly high level of material redundancy. Field analysts have documented multiple instances of overlapping resource caches, often placed according to a mathematical pattern resembling data integrity protocols. These caches include redundant ammunition stores, spare cybernetic components, and replacement limbs, positioned in formations suggesting pre-planned routes of fallback or repair. Administratum logisticians find this behaviour peculiar, noting that it requires significant pre-engagement calculation. Mechanicus representatives counter that this is evidence of the Iron Hands' pursuit of perfection through predictive design. On the subject of personnel distribution, Administratum estimates suggest the Iron Hands maintain a fighting strength slightly below the standard 1,000 Space Marines prescribed by the Codex Astartes. However, this figure is widely disputed. The Mechanicus claims that the chapter compensates for this by employing a vast array of cybernetic auxiliaries, servitors, and automata. Quantitative data recovered from joint Mechanicus Iron Hands operations indicate that for every Iron Hands warrior, between 8 to 12 mechanical support units operate in the same theatre. The Administratum, lacking direct access to Medusa's manufactorums, cannot verify this ratio, though it acknowledges that Iron Hands deployments exhibit disproportionately large logistic signatures for their known manpower size. In terms of recruitment and replacement cycles, the Administratum reports irregularity. The Iron Hands do not follow the linear pattern of aspirant intake observed in other chapters. Instead, their recruitment appears linked to Medusa's technological activity cycles. Mechanicus observers have correlated recruitment surges with increased geothermal flux or major forge awakenings across Medusa, implying that the chapter's initiation rituals coincide with planetary industrial events. The Administratum interprets this as a symbolic reflection of the Iron Hands' mechanized faith, although Mechanicus scholars argue it is a deliberate synchronization between biological and mechanical renewal. From a logistical analytic standpoint, both the Administratum and Mechanicus agree that the Iron Hands maintain one of the most efficient battlefield recovery systems in the Imperium. Damaged equipment is rarely abandoned. Cogitator logs from Mechanicus field attachments reveal that Iron Hands forces employ combat retrieval units capable of salvaging damaged dreadnoughts, vehicle cores, and even fallen warriors mid-conflict. Administratum records, while lacking first-hand verification, contain numerous second-tier confirmations of post-battle retrieval operations conducted within hours of victory. This behaviour contributes to the chapter's exceptional equipment retention rate, with Mechanicus audits estimating over 87% recovery efficiency. Adeptus Mechanicus reports emphasise that Iron Hands wargear exhibits modular design philosophies. Armour plates, weapon systems, and cybernetic graphs are designed for interchangeability, allowing damaged units to be quickly replaced in the field. Administratum analysts note that this method extends the operational lifespan of wargear by centuries beyond expected codex projections. Some Mechanicus logi believe that the Iron Hand's extensive cybernetic integration enables faster feedback between warrior and machine, reducing diagnostic lag and improving maintenance efficiency. Administratum records cautiously label this unverified synergy between organic and mechanical interfaces. The Mechanicus views the Iron Hands as ideal allies in the pursuit of technological advancement, though they also recognise potential ideological risks. Data recovered from the Forge, World of Isstvan, reveal periodic disagreements between Iron Hands clans and local magos regarding the boundaries of the Omnissiah's authority. Administratum notes confirm that such disputes are resolved through negotiation rather than violence, yet repeated patterns suggest an underlying divergence in belief. The Iron Hands revere the machine as purity in form and function, whereas the Mechanicus sees it as divine expression. This subtle variance may explain why some Iron Hands technologies remain restricted from wider Mechanicus study. Administratum predictive models suggest that the Iron Hands' increasing reliance on machine integration could eventually alter the chapter's demographic and psychological profiles. A classified sub-analysis within the Divisionum Psychologica indicates a measurable decline in organic empathy traits across multiple generations of Iron Hands gene seed lineages. Mechanicus data cognitors dispute the premise, arguing that the removal of organic weakness constitutes an evolutionary improvement rather than a deficiency. The Administratum's model, however, labels the trend as potential dehumanization risk, warning that prolonged deviation from baseline human empathy could compromise inter-chapter cooperation or imperial diplomatic relations. Despite these concerns, both organizations recognize the Iron Hand's unmatched contribution to imperial warfare logistics. Mechanicus analysts rank them among the top 3 chapters in mechanized efficiency, surpassed only by those directly attached to Forge worlds. Administratum projections estimate that Iron Hand's deployment strategies achieve a 94% logistical success rate across recorded operations. Their war efforts demonstrate minimal downtime, low resource waste, and near-perfect asset recovery, leading some Administratum auditors to describe them as post-human administrators of war. The Iron Hands' methods remain inscrutable by human bureaucratic standards. To the Administratum, they are a system impossible to quantify entirely. To the Mechanicus, they represent a living extension of machine logic in human form. The data remains consistent across both sources. Every recorded instance of their engagement demonstrates not only martial prowess, but an underlying algorithmic harmony between organic purpose and mechanical precision, a synthesis that the Administratum can document, but not replicate. The Administratum records concerning the Iron Hand's major engagements reveal a consistent behavioral pattern, one defined by absolute mechanical discipline and a refusal to accommodate inefficiency or sentiment. The earliest documented campaigns following the Horus Heresy identify the Iron Hands as one of the most systematically precise chapters in Imperial history. Mechanicus data archives corroborate this impression, emphasizing that the chapter's approach to warfare is defined not by emotional strategy in the conventional sense, but by predictive combat logic, pre-engagement calculation, and total battlefield control through mechanical integration. Among the earliest surviving reports within the Administratum's military logicae are those of the Medusan Purges, a series of cleansing campaigns across the unstable regions of Medusa itself. These operations occurred intermittently across multiple centuries following the chapter's establishment. Each purge was conducted with mathematical regularity, corresponding to the planet's cyclical tectonic shifts. the Iron Hands identified emergent threats, mutant tribes, techno-barbarians, and feral machine constructs that surfaced whenever Medusa's crust fractured and new geothermal zones exposed hidden vaults. Instead of waiting for these hostiles to grow, the Iron Hands would initiate a preemptive strike pattern, wiping entire sectors clean within days. The Mechanicus noted the efficiency of their process. Aerial scans recorded geometrically precise patterns of bombardment, suggesting that the Iron Hands employed orbital data to model the fastest route to total neutralization. The Administratum classified these purges as internal stabilizing operations, though the scale of devastation often exceeded necessity, a trait that would later define their approach to war. One of the most cited external engagements is the defense of Thrax in Millennia 38, year 212. Administratum war logs detail that the Iron Hands deployed 3 full clan companies against an Orc incursion numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Instead of establishing defensive positions, the Iron Hands constructed a grid of automated fortifications equipped with motion-sensing turrets and autonomous servitor artillery. Mechanicus observers recorded the Iron Hands' tactical algorithm as one of constant adaptive recalibration, meaning their combat systems continually analysed Orc movements and adjusted kill zones in real time. The Administratum estimated that Orc losses exceeded 97% within 37 hours of engagement. Only 77 Iron Hands casualties were recorded, most of them from overexerted servo constructs rather than biological fatality. The Thrax engagement remains one of the most mathematically efficient planetary defences in Imperial records. Another major conflict preserved in the Mechanicus Nuspheric logs is the Ganymede reclamation, occurring during Millennia 39. Ganymede, a moon within the Jovian subsystem, had fallen under the control of a rogue tech cult that fused Xenos technology with corrupted Imperial machinery. The Iron Hands deployment was officially sanctioned by the Fabricator General of Mars. Their objective was to retrieve data fragments before the cult's AI constructs could evolve beyond containment. The Iron Hands executed a full-scale orbital drop using Mechanicus-designed descent coffins, hardened pods that allowed squads to embed directly into fortified terrain. Upon impact, each Iron Hands unit immediately linked into a shared tactical network, facilitated by cybernetic uplink, effectively creating a planet-wide combat cortex. Mechanicus observers stationed in orbit recorded real-time transmission bursts resembling machine prayer, indicating that the Iron Hands were synchronizing biological and mechanical elements in unison. The engagement was swift and merciless. The rogue tech cult's defenses were neutralized within 4 standard hours. Administratum analysts noted that the Iron Hands made no effort to reclaim survivors, instead incinerating all organic remains and melting the Xenos integrated machinery down to component alloys. Mechanicus commentary described this as a purification by precision, a process in which the Iron Hands dismantled every trace of technological corruption with surgical efficiency. The Ganymede reclamation reinforced the chapter's reputation as the Imperium's most capable, mechanized purifiers, destroyers not of life, but of imperfection. Records from Millennia 40, year 87, describe another notable campaign, the reforging of Thule. Administratum war historians list this event as both an act of vengeance and reclamation. Thule, a once productive forge moon, had been overrun by Heretic forces. The Iron Hands mobilized in response, deploying what Mechanicus sources describe as multi-tiered cybernetic legions. The battle was notable for the Iron Hands' experimental use of self-repairing dreadnoughts, a technology believed to have originated from cooperative Mechanicus research. The Administratum's field reports from Thule describe the Iron Hands' tactics as brutally methodical. They employed siege walkers and tracked vehicles to grind through enemy defenses in a wave pattern, advancing 1 meter at a time while deploying suppressive plasma grids to prevent retreat. Audio records recovered post-battle capture the rhythmic hum of machine chants, synchronized across multiple frequencies, believed to have been broadcast from the Iron Father's Vox networks. Mechanicus logs record a 92% reclamation of forge infrastructure, with minimal loss of functional machinery. a recovery rate unmatched in Imperial siege history. The Iron Hand's fighting style across all documented campaigns shares defining characteristics: precision, patience, and predictability in the mathematical sense. Administratum Tactical Analysis identifies their strategy as calculated attrition, rather than relying on impulsive heroics or emotional surges as seen in other chapters. The Iron Hands construct battles as logical progressions of cause and effect. Each engagement is pre-simulated before launch, with every variable accounted for, including acceptable loss thresholds. Mechanicus battlefield telemetry indicates that Iron Hands units rarely act without machine verification. Their cybernetic augmentations provide continuous updates through localized cogitator feeds. This allows their warriors to anticipate enemy positions with near-perfect accuracy. The Mechanicus views their fighting methodology as a manifestation of machine perfection in motion. Their weapon selections prioritize stability and maintenance over flair, plasma weaponry calibrated to optimal charge duration, bolters with recoil compensators fine-tuned for precision grouping, and servo-assisted limbs enabling consistent fire under prolonged recoil. Administratum recovery teams often note that Iron Hand's battlefield debris is minimal, as the chapter systematically retrieves damaged materials after engagement. Even destroyed enemies are often dismantled for usable components. To the Iron Hands, every fragment of war has purpose, and no inefficiency is tolerated. Their battlefield communication is structured less like command hierarchy, and more like a data network. Orders are transmitted through binary command strings, often incomprehensible to unaided human senses. Mechanicus Lex Mechanics embedded with the chapter report that Iron Hand's Vox exchanges contain near zero emotional inflection, consisting of brief bursts of machine code followed by precise execution. Administratum analysts conclude that this system minimizes misinterpretation, though they note its side effect: the near-complete elimination of individuality in combat. Each Iron Hands warrior acts as a single component of a larger construct, sacrificing autonomy for perfect cohesion. The Iron Hands engagement at the Purge of Piraeus serves as an example of this behaviour's extreme efficiency. During this campaign, the chapter deployed in support of the Imperial Guard against a Tyrannid splinter fleet. Administratum combat records show that while Guard regiments suffered catastrophic losses, Iron Hands casualties remained statistically negligible. Rather than aiding retreating allies, the Iron Hands maintained firing patterns according to pre-calculated fields of fire. Mechanicus observers noted that the chapter's cold prioritization of efficiency over compassion resulted in a kill ratio estimated at over 100 to 1. Administratum archives list the Purge of Piraeus as both a victory and a psychological liability, as Guard survivors reportedly described the Iron Hands as soulless engines of war. Mechanicus data also highlights the Iron Hands' precision in joint operations with other chapters. During the Siege of Dwell, Millennia 40, year 412, the Iron Hands fought alongside the Salamanders and Raven Guard. The Administratum noted friction between the Allied forces. The Iron Hands insisted on enforcing machine-logical battle formations that conflicted with the Salamanders' humanitarian rescue tactics. Mechanicus reports confirm that the Iron Hands strategy ultimately achieved total annihilation of the enemy at the cost of significant civilian casualties. The incident reinforced the chapter's reputation for being ruthlessly efficient and void of emotion, characteristics that both the Administratum and Mechanicus have different interpretations with. To the former, these traits are signs of inhumanity; to the latter, evidence of ascension beyond flawed emotion. A recurring theme across Mechanicus field analytics is the Iron Hands' preference for mechanized engagement over infantry heavy assaults. Their armies deploy armored units in structured phalanxes, integrating tanks, dreadnoughts, and bionically enhanced warriors into a synchronized formation. Administratum analysts refer to this as mechanized layering, the use of overlapping fields of motion and firepower to ensure total spatial dominance. Their dreadnoughts, revered as near-divine relics, function as mobile command nodes within these formations. Mechanicus tech adepts describe these constructs as memory engines. preserving the data and experience of the chapter's greatest warriors in eternal cycles of warfare. The Iron Hand's mechanical philosophy extends into their treatment of failure. Administratum notes indicate that battlefield errors are met not with punishment, but with augmentation. A warrior who falters is not reprimanded but rebuilt, often losing portions of flesh to cybernetic enhancement. Mechanicus observers report that this process reinforces the chapter's pursuit of self-correction, mirroring the iterative perfection of machine logic. To the Iron Hands, war is not an act of passion or conquest, but a continual process of refinement, a forge where weakness is burned away until only efficiency remains. Administratum data analysts summarize their overall combat performance with a single consistent observation. The Iron Hands do not fight battles, they execute equations. Every movement, every act of destruction, every tactical adjustment follows a predetermined logic pattern. Mechanicus Magi refer to this as combat calculus, an application of mathematical probability to real-time war. The results speak for themselves. Across all recorded engagements, Iron Hand's victory rates exceed 90%, with average resource loss margins significantly lower than those of comparable chapters. The Administratum, bound to measure war through bureaucratic metrics, struggles to translate this precision into moral comprehension. The Mechanicus, by contrast, reveres it. To the priests of Mars, the Iron Hands are not merely warriors, they are an evolutionary convergence of man and machine, the closest realization of the Omnissiah's perfection in flesh. Whether this interpretation is faith or observation remains unclear, but both institutions agree on one immutable fact. Wherever the Iron Hands wage war, chaos collapses into order, flesh yields to steel, and inefficiency is erased from existence with surgical finality. The fragmented testimonies and mechanical recordings that remain of the Iron Hands campaigns form a patchwork of cold efficiency and unsettling precision. To the untrained observer, their methods might seem cruel, but to the Mechanicus and Administratum analysts who have studied their wars in detail, the logic is unassailable. Efficiency and destruction is, after all, a virtue in the calculus of survival. Few Imperial Guard survivors have witnessed the Iron Hands in battle and lived to speak of it. Those who have often described them in terms that blur the line between admiration and horror. Sergeant Loran Vex of the 84th Armageddon Steel Legion reported during the Second War for Armageddon that the Iron Hands' intervention felt like fighting alongside the machines themselves. He elaborated that once the enemy line was identified, the Iron Hands advanced without hesitation, breaking formation only to adapt their angles of fire or to deploy servitors in suppressive crossfire patterns. They didn't shout, didn't rally, didn't even acknowledge our presence, he said. It was like watching statues of iron glide through the smoke until something moved wrong and then everything died. A tech adept assigned to observe a joint operation on Medusa's moon, Targon Prime, noted that the Iron Hands coordinated their movements with a precision surpassing that of any human army. The chapter's servo automata maintained a continuous data link across the battlefield, feeding live metrics on ammunition consumption, enemy movement and casualty ratios to the command augurs. Their captains calculate, the adept wrote, not with passion or faith, but with the cold arithmetic of logic engines. The flesh fears the cost of war, but they, these Iron Hands, have purged such weakness. Those who fought beside them rarely saw a display of emotion, even at victory's edge. When the 33rd Vostroyan Firstborn raised the Imperial banner over the ruins of Hive Marnak, the Iron Hands stood silently, scanning the smoke for signs of ambush. To them, celebration was inefficiency. War never truly ended, only paused. The aftermath of Iron Hands campaigns often bears their unmistakable imprint. Cities stripped of non-essential organic labour, manufactoria restructured under Mechanicus oversight, and enemy corpses harvested for biological material. The chapter's Iron Fathers oversee purification and reclamation rites after each campaign, ensuring that no useful component, biological or mechanical, is wasted. They are known to retrieve even the remains of their fallen brothers for interment in dreadnought sarcophagi, or for conversion into cybernetic servitors. On Graia, after the Orc invasion, the Iron Hands methods drew criticism from the Administratum. The chapter had requisitioned vast sections of local industry for reconstruction under Mechanicus control, citing the inefficiency of human oversight. Entire guilds and labour unions were disbanded overnight, replaced by mind-linked labour drones. The surviving population was reduced to maintenance roles or exported to other forges as indentured technicians. The Adeptus Administratum's auditors described the Iron Hands governance as mechanistically optimal but spiritually arid. Productivity rose by 148% within 2 standard years, yet morale plummeted, and local ecclesiarchy attendance fell to historical lows. It became evident that wherever the Iron Hands' influence extended, faith diminished while function thrived, a pattern that both intrigued and disturbed the higher authorities of Terra. Administratum analysts classify the Iron Hands as a compliance-favoured asset, a force that achieves objectives with minimal resource drain, albeit at a long-term cost to Imperial cohesion. Their relentless culling of inefficiency, even among allied command structures, makes them reliable, but difficult to integrate into cooperative theatres. Reports indicate that during the defence of Talassar Reach, Iron Hands commanders terminated an entire platoon of PDF officers after their delay in executing an order led to a 0.3% deviation in timeline projections. The chapter later filed the action as necessary correction. To the bureaucratic mind of the Administratum, this logic holds mathematical merit, yet the implications for imperial unity remain problematic. The chapter's disregard for human frailty undermines morale in mixed force campaigns. Imperial command has quietly restricted their deployment to critical but isolated sectors, zones where efficiency outweighs diplomacy. The Mechanicus, conversely, regards the Iron Hands as near-perfect reflections of the machine god's will. Magos biologists treat them as exemplary case studies in post-human integration. Their constant pursuit of cybernetic refinement mirrors the Mechanicus doctrine that flesh is transient and imperfect. It is recorded that Fabricator General Kane once referred to the Iron Hands as the closest approximation of Omnissiah's intention ever birthed by the Emperor's design. Data from Mechanicus observers on Medusa confirm that the Iron Hands gene seed exhibits minimal deviation from the original Ferrus Manus strain, though cybernetic augmentation renders traditional biological measurement nearly meaningless. Their internal structure resembles that of a Mechanicus forge cult more than a typical Astartes chapter, ironically aligning them closer to the machine worshippers they once merely tolerated. However, even among the Mechanicus there is caution. The Iron Hands' interpretation of the flesh's weakness borders on heretical abstraction, while the Mechanicus seeks union with the Omnissiah through understanding and reverence. The Iron Hands seek transcendence through rejection. This divergence, though subtle, marks a philosophical fracture that both sides quietly acknowledge but never confront. From both Imperial and Mechanicus analyses, the Iron Hands emerge as both a triumph and a warning. Their logic is pure, their efficiency unmatched, their faith redirected. In their pursuit of perfection, they have achieved a form of post-human clarity that terrifies as much as it inspires. To the Administratum, they are an asset too sharp to handle without risk. To the Mechanicus, they are proof that even the Emperor's creations can evolve toward the machine god's likeness. Between these perspectives lies the unspoken truth. The Iron Hands have become something beyond either faith or empire, a cold inheritance of Ferrus Manus's ideal, reforged without mercy or doubt. Inquisitorial archives concerning the Iron Hands remain incomplete due to restricted access protocols and fragmented reports retrieved from Adeptus Mechanicus data vaults. The earliest investigations by the Order Hereticus describe the chapter as an anomaly within the wider structure of the Adeptus Astartes. Their compliance with imperial law is absolute, yet their philosophical orientation deviates from conventional human doctrine. The absence of emotion in their recorded communications, the calculated nature of their decision-making and their partial alignment with Mechanicus tenets have all raised concern within multiple ordos. Initial contact records from the third year of the 41st millennia show that Inquisition agents stationed in the Medusan sector documented repeated barriers to information retrieval. Administratum and Mechanicus networks returned incomplete or corrupted data whenever Medusa-related queries were made. Physical correspondence and analog archives, when examined, displayed signs of deliberate redaction at the source. In one instance, a requisition order from the Order Hereticus directed at the Iron Council was returned unacknowledged for 123 standard years. The response, when eventually transmitted, consisted solely of a single line of text. Request acknowledged. No deviation detected. Subsequent evaluations conducted by the Order Xenos and Order Machinum described the Iron Hands as exhibiting cold loyalty and mechanically consistent adherence. Cross-analysis between multiple inquisitorial sources determined that the chapter does not practice faith in a recognizable form. The Emperor is venerated as a functional constant, a guiding principle within the universal equation of order, rather than as a deity. Inquisitorial lex mechanics classified this theological stance as the logic of divinity, a term originating in Mechanicus data theory. This classification remains under review. Field agents embedded within joint Mechanicus Iron Hands operations noted minimal interpersonal interaction between Astartes and Imperial staff. No recreational or communal activity was observed among the chapter's warriors. When not deployed, most Iron Hands entered what was referred to as a reduction phase, consisting of mechanical calibration, biofeedback regulation, and neural synchronization. Biological maintenance was secondary to the upkeep of augmetics. In one documented instance aboard the strike cruiser Ferrum Ultima, an apothecary was observed removing and reattaching an ocular unit 3 times in succession during routine checks, apparently calibrating it to environmental humidity. Witness statements collected by attached inquisitorial observers describe near-silent operations even during high-intensity engagements. Combat instructions were issued through encrypted machine code pulses rather than vocal command. One report from the Ordo Xenos refers to an Iron Hands detachment advancing through the ruins of a Tyranid-infested hive city without any discernible sound except the friction of metal on dust. Casualty reports confirm that all non-Astartes personnel within 30 meters of their combat formations were rendered obsolete to the chain of command, either ignored or relocated by Iron Fathers without verbal acknowledgement. Anomalous energy signatures have been detected emanating from the Iron Hands' primary fortress monastery, the Medusan Forgehold. Machine spirit resonance studies conducted by the Order Machinum identified multiple harmonic frequencies inconsistent with Mechanicus standard calibration. These frequencies correspond to no known cogitator pattern and appear to shift based on local atmospheric pressure, suggesting a reactive system rather than a static design. Attempts to trace the source resulted in temporary malfunction of Inquisition-grade Auspex arrays. The phenomenon was labelled the Ferrum distortion. Comparative biomechanical examinations indicate that Iron Hands augmentation ratios exceed 70% in some cases. This ratio renders them functionally closer to synthetic constructs than organic soldiers. Inquisitorial medical records contain 3 instances of Iron Hands combatants continuing operational movement for up to 4 hours after confirmed cardiopulmonary cessation. The Mechanicus attributes this to redundant servo circuitry and neural synchronization nodes. No official explanation has been released concerning the apparent absence of post-mortem decay in certain retrieved remains. Cognitive analysis suggests a gradual suppression of individual identity. Standard chapter doctrines across the Astartes emphasize honor, valor, and brotherhood. Iron Hands combat recordings reveal no such expressions. Communication logs show no personal identifiers, nicknames, or emotional inflection. Each transmission follows a rigid structure: designation, status report, result confirmation. Even in post-engagement debriefings, there is no record of self-reference. The Ordo psychologist determined that the chapter may have achieved a state of collective cognition, facilitated by partial neural interfacing. Attempts to verify this were declined by the Iron Council, on the grounds of irrelevance to function. The Inquisition maintains restricted access to several sealed sub-archives detailing unexplained Iron Hands activity. One record, designated Medusa Data File 17 Omicron, references an incident where a Mechanicus exploratory vessel reported contact with an Iron Hands task group operating in an uncharted system near the Halo stars. The task group's heraldry matched the second company, long presumed active elsewhere. When hailed, the fleet's return transmission consisted of a distorted binary pattern repeated indefinitely. The Mechanicus vessel recorded 32 repetitions before signal collapse. Follow-up investigation found no trace of the Iron Hands presence, and long-range Auspex scans revealed residual gravitic distortion, consistent with temporal displacement. The Ordo Chronos classified the file as anomalous yet inconclusive. A second file, Inquiry Ref. Ferrus Delta V, details the recovery of a damaged sarcophagus believed to belong to a dreadnought of Iron Hands origin. Within the unit's data cores, an internal audio log was partially decrypted. The log consisted of rhythmic metallic tapping interspersed with phrases referencing the return of the hand and the transmission without end. Cross-reference with known Iron Hands canticles yielded no linguistic correlation. The artifact was transferred to Mars for study. All related Mechanicus personnel later reported auditory hallucinations described as echoes of machinery beneath the skin. An additional phenomenon listed as Ferrum Anomaly 29 involved a dead Iron Hands Marine recovered on a derelict transport in the Segmentum Obscurus. The warrior's biological tissues displayed no decomposition after 50 standard years in vacuum. Auspex scans revealed faint electromagnetic pulses within cranial circuitry. The signal ceased upon transfer to an inquisitorial containment chamber, resuming only when the unit was reintroduced to a Mechanicus environment. No further investigation was authorized. In summary, the Iron Hands remain categorized as loyal but unfathomable. Inquisitorial consensus accepts their strategic value yet maintains observation protocols at the highest level. No confirmed evidence of heresy exists, but persistent anomalies within their data transmissions, physiological parameters, and battlefield conduct suggest that the chapter's evolution diverges further from baseline humanity with each passing century. The Ordo Hereticus continues to monitor for threshold breach indicators defined as total neural link cohesion, disappearance of biological baseline, or self-determined doctrinal isolation. Inquisition archives referencing the Iron Hands battlefield activities reveal numerous irregularities in both official records and secondary Mechanicus transcriptions. Many data files have undergone partial redaction or have been reclassified under the Segmentum Obscurus pattern seals, indicating potential information suppression. The following accounts were recovered through cross-referencing Administratum After Action reports, Mechanicus transmission logs, and eyewitness statements collected by Ordo representatives across multiple campaigns. All findings remain classified under Ferrum Index Observation Priority. The earliest notable irregularity dates to the cleansing of Thraxus Prime during the mid-41st millennia. According to Administratum Logistics, a detachment of Iron Hands, identified as the Fourth Company, participated in joint operations with the Raven Guard. However, independent records retrieved from the Mechanicus relay on Kievar indicate that both chapters deployed identical squad designations to two separate war zones at the same time. Cross-referenced star charts confirm a temporal discrepancy of 46 hours between recorded engagements. Inquisitorial analysts concluded that at least one of the deployment records was falsified, though no source has claimed responsibility for the data manipulation. Witness reports from both theatres describe identical Iron Hands leadership markings and call sign frequencies, suggesting either duplication or unauthorized replication of command codes. The subsequent engagement, known as the Purge of Hive Kelbros, displays further inconsistencies. Planetary Defense Force records indicate the Iron Hands deployed an estimated force of 200 Astartes. However, Mechanicus logistic tallies of transport fuel expenditure and ammunition output correspond to less than half that figure. Post-battle forensic analysis discovered augmetic fragments bearing the same serial numbers in multiple separate sectors of the battlefield. Several of these components were fused to Mechanicus servitor constructs that were not listed on the operational manifest. Inquisitorial investigators concluded that the Iron Hands may have integrated non-chapter machine elements directly into their combat formations, though no confirmation has been permitted by the Iron Council. Another anomaly appears in the records of the Medusan Reclamation. This event, spanning 3 decades, is referenced in Mechanicus archives as a purification of resource zones, but is entirely absent from administrate and planetary registries. Surface readings collected by orbital augurs show regions of Medusa's equatorial zones irradiated beyond conventional mining tolerance, with residual signatures resembling plasma bombardment. No record exists of hostile incursion. When questioned, Iron Fathers of the Iron Council stated that the damage resulted from self-directed correction. The statement was entered without elaboration, and no further access was granted. An Inquisition attaché during the Gyostengrad campaign reported observing an Iron Hand strike force engage a Chaos warband identified as the Children of the Ragged Coil. Auspex logs from Imperial Navy support craft recorded Iron Hands units advancing through toxic fog with movement speeds inconsistent with Astartes' physiology. The data indicated fluctuating biometric readings, suggesting partial phase displacement during close-quarters combat. Enemy casualties were total, and the corrupted planet was declared sterile. When the attaché attempted to recover battlefield relics for study, Iron Hands personnel systematically destroyed all remnants, including their own fallen, using targeted melter charges. When questioned regarding this act, a senior Iron Father stated, "Corruption cannot persist within perfect circuitry." The phrasing was identical to language found in Mechanicus ritual lexicons dated to pre-heresy Mars. Another documented encounter involves the Sarum interdiction event, wherein an Iron Hands detachment reportedly entered orbit above the ancient forge world of Sarum, classified by the Mechanicus as partially quarantined due to techno-heresy residue from the Horus Heresy era. No official deployment orders were logged through Imperial Navy channels. Orbital picked feeds captured 6 strike cruisers, transmitting binaric signals not corresponding to any known Mechanicus dialect. The fleet maintained position for 47 minutes before departing without explanation. Weeks later, Sarum's outer data grid emitted an encrypted pulse toward the Medusa system. The Adeptus Mechanicus recorded the event as technological interference and declined to investigate further. In a separate incident known as the Battle of Carthax Gate, Iron Hands forces were observed by the Ordo Malleus conducting deep strike maneuvers into warp-exposed zones. The recorded telemetry displays no standard navigational beacon or astropathic guide signal. Instead, the Iron Hands appeared to orient their trajectory through what Mechanicus observers described as direct logic computation, adjusting course instantaneously in response to flux changes within the immaterium. All deployed forces re-emerged precisely within the enemy's rear formation without recorded deviation. No casualties were reported among the Iron Hands. Post-battle interviews with naval escorts confirm that no Geller field fluctuations were detected during re-entry, an event that contradicts known warp transit physics. The Ordo Malleus subsequently sealed the report under Ferrum Lock Code 01 Theta, noting incomplete understanding of transit mechanics. The Inquisition maintains a series of sealed intelligence files under the Ferrum Logi collection, containing references to unverified Iron Hands actions. One document, file designate Ferrum Theta 11, concerns an unconfirmed battle on an unregistered ice world within the Veiled region. An anonymous Mechanicus log fragment retrieved from an abandoned relay buoy describes the Iron Hands encountering an unidentified hostile composed entirely of non-organic entities. The entry ends with a partial transmission: unity achieved, system aligned, flesh redundant. The data was encrypted using an obsolete Martian cipher not used since the Dark Age of technology. Efforts to trace the signal origin resulted in data corruption across 6 inquisitorial relay stations. Another sealed dossier, Ferrum Omega-7, contains fragments of visual footage depicting Iron Hand's war engines during the Skaal Rift suppression. The images show heavy armour configurations inconsistent with known patterns, vehicles combining dreadnought chassis with exposed mechanical spines extending from their rear plating. One frame shows an Iron Father interfacing directly with the machine via cranial plug sockets, the body suspended without visible life signs. The recording terminates abruptly with electromagnetic interference. A Mechanicus verification team classified the footage as unauthenticated, though the visual fidelity was consistent with Imperial-grade equipment. A third classified record, file Ferrum Aleph-9, is marked as auto-redacted. Only fragments remain legible. The visible section references the assault on Phaeton Minor, during which Iron Hand's elements allegedly utilized experimental plasma constructs described as synthetic entities derived from neural mapping. The remaining pages are burned out by directed photonic degradation, suggesting intentional removal through Mechanicus purification measures. The attached note, unsigned, reads, "Containment impossible, data recursion complete." The cumulative pattern across all engagements reveals consistent operational irregularities, duplication of forces, unexplained energy signatures, non-standard mechanized assets, and references to unauthorized technological interaction. While the Iron Hands continue to perform within sanctioned Imperial objectives, the underlying anomalies suggest independent doctrinal evolution beyond Mechanicus oversight. Inquisition consensus categorizes the chapter as strategically beneficial but technologically divergent. Continued observation is mandated under Clause Ferrum Imperative 341, requiring automatic review of all Iron Hands combat transmissions exceeding 30 seconds in encrypted duration. No definitive evidence of heresy or xenotech integration has been confirmed. However, the frequency of sealed reports, coupled with the increasing number of Mechanicus redactions concerning Iron Hands operations, indicates growing data fragmentation. The Order Hereticus has noted that absence of corruption is not proof of purity, merely an indication of efficiency. Several restricted archives within the Ordo Hereticus bear the seal of the Iron Hands designation, marked under the sigil of Sigma Obscura, an inquisitorial classification reserved for incidents exhibiting doctrinal irregularity or unexplained deviations from sanctioned behaviour. The majority of these documents remain fragmentary, recovered through Mechanicus audit intercepts and secondary administratum data sweeps, rather than direct submission by the chapter itself. Patterns suggest that the Iron Hands do not conceal information through malice, but through an inherent refusal to acknowledge emotional context as relevant data. They record only what functions and disregard what disturbs. One of the earliest redacted files concerns the aftermath of the Archenfall Crusade, where multiple sources indicate that Iron Hands detachments terminated not only the enemy, but allied guard formations deemed compromised by weakness. The official after-action report submitted to Segmentum Command omits the event entirely, substituting binary logs describing purity restoration and system recalibration. Inquisitorial review of these codes, once translated, revealed phrasing inconsistent with standard Astartes lexicon, expressions implying the cleansing of flesh redundancies within friendly assets. The incident remains sealed under edict, with all secondary witnesses reassigned to frontier garrisons or declared missing. Another recovered file details a breach during the Vortan engagement, where Iron Hands forces reportedly disengaged mid-campaign following the sudden activation of a non-human machine relic beneath the surface. Adeptus Mechanicus records indicate the chapter established a temporary no-entry zone, citing machine sanctity protocols before sealing the site with melter charges. When an inquisitorial retrieval team attempted access years later, all instrumentation registered massive residual power fields despite the absence of any material trace. Fragments of data from the team's final transmission suggest exposure to a binary hymn of unknown origin, described as auditory recursion without linguistic endpoint. The team was lost. The incident remains categorized as unverified machine resonance contamination. Later documentation from the Ordo Xenos cross-references the Iron Hands with unidentified activity in the eastern fringe of the Ultima Segmentum, where Imperial Augur stations logged unregistered signal bursts matching the chapter's encryption pattern. The transmissions originated from a derelict void construct resembling a Mechanicus exploration platform, yet bearing structural inconsistencies. No Iron Hands vessel was officially recorded in the region, and no subsequent acknowledgement was received when the matter was queried. The coordinates have since been purged from the chart by inquisitorial order. The compiled data leads to a singular and discomforting inference. The Iron Hands operate with a logic distinct from Imperial orthodoxy. Their pursuit of strength through the removal of weakness extends into their interpretation of loyalty itself. They appear to regard obedience as a function of efficiency rather than reverence. To them, the Emperor is not a father to be worshipped, but an uncorrupted design to be replicated. This philosophy, while not heretical in explicit form, bears a trajectory that defies standard human constancy. Several Inquisitors, upon extended observation, have reported sensations of unease when interfacing with Iron Hands personnel. A recurring description appears in the marginal notes of debrief transcripts. The sense that the Astartes are evaluating the observer, not in moral or emotional terms but in structural ones, as though measuring tolerances and failure rates. No evidence suggests hostility, yet the absence of empathy itself constitutes an anomaly within the framework of sanctioned human norms. The final assessments within the sealed dossier conclude that the Iron Hands represent both a triumph and a caution. They embody the Emperor's dream of perfected mankind while simultaneously erasing the man from the design. In the words of an anonymous Ordo Hereticus archivist found appended to the terminal entry, "They will never rebel, for rebellion is inefficiency. But should the Imperium itself become inefficient, they will not mourn its removal, they will simply proceed.